This is Max from UNFTR here with the Macro Take, the weekly overview of economic and political news exclusively for the Midas Touch Network. We've got jobs and inflation data to cover, some more fallout from the AI and big tech universe, updated figures from the Treasury, and so much more to get into, including Pam Bondi losing the plot on Capitol Hill, Scott Bessent doing his best to set up Republicans for midterm success, and some pundits who actually managed to speak the truth on mainstream media. Settle in, Midas Mighty. It's just another week in Bizarro America. All right, let's switch it up and hop into our lead story today before we get into some headlines and some data releases.
You sit here and you attack the president, and I am not going to have it. I'm not going to put up with it.
Whoa, lady. Take it easy. This is a Trump-free zone today, I promise. But you are actually our top story, so I'm glad you're here. All eyes were on Capitol Hill this week as the nation's top mean girl brought her burn book to oversight hearings on the Epstein files. Attorney General Pam Bondi—
Pan or Pam?
It's Pam.
Pam Bondi turned the hearings into a complete spectacle, refusing throughout to acknowledge the victims seated behind her, who are still awaiting any semblance of justice as the administration pretends to promote transparency while actually stonewalling Congress and averting justice. But what caught my attention was what AG Bondi actually found really important.
The Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm chortling. Please, by all means, continue.
The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records.
Right. The stock market. I mean, who needs justice for sex trafficking victims when the stock market is breaking records every week? No one, and I mean no one, can predict what the stock market is going to do. But it is clear that the capital class is willing to go along to get along, even with the most heinous of crimes, from sex trafficking to hollowing out the middle class, just as long as their precious stock market is left alone. And even though no one can say for sure where it's headed, I can tell you with great certainty why it's so high while everything else feels so terrible around it. It's all about capital flows. When stock market valuations used to reflect some semblance of a company's performance, there was an equilibrium of sorts that made equities sensitive to economic data. Take the dot-com bubble as an example. There were major market corrections because investors looked at the situation and understood that the fundamentals didn't make any sense. And when one domino fell, they all came tumbling down, and the market returned to earth for a moment. Then it ran hot again, as we know, before hitting a wall during the financial crisis less than a decade later. And that's when everything changed. When we turned the money printing machine on, it was more indiscriminate than we realized at the time. As much as the Obama playbook under Larry Summers and Tim Geithner was to send stimulus money into the economy on a timely, temporary, and targeted basis, Ben Bernanke was doing that and more behind the scenes at the Federal Reserve. It made banks and their portfolio companies whole, and then some. As a result, the corporate class in the banking sector was able to deleverage at low interest rates and then recapitalize over time, sending the riskier stuff into the private credit market and making access to capital on Main Street more difficult because the American people were a riskier bet than the American corporation. Then after COVID, we repeated the same playbook under Trump and then Biden, but on steroids. This time, more money did make it into the hands of American people because of the extraordinary circumstances. But it had another latent effect in the stock market that we're experiencing today. The sheer amount of money supply that was generated went everywhere. We sold dollars through the Treasury and flooded the world with them. And then we shored up the balance sheets once again of small, medium, and large businesses in America. Then Biden passed the Inflation Reduction Act to hammer home government spending, in the long run at least, and then suddenly the whole world was awash in more dollars than ever before. And because the world got used to the notion of America's companies having the ultimate backstop in the Fed, something that they refer to as the Fed put, global investors were all too happy to purchase our dollars at a small premium and then pour them back into the stock market for a huge return. But because our corporations had already gone through massive deleveraging and shored up their balance sheets, when they accessed this new money at lower rates, they did things like buy back their own shares and issue more dividends. None of that money comes to us. It goes to shareholders. So to the extent that you do have a retirement account in a 401k or an IRA, that's pretty well and good for you. But for the vast majority of Americans, that's just not the case. And this is why the elite in this country, like the worst anchor on CNBC, a guy named Joe Kernan, who cannot hide his partisan leanings to save his life, simply cannot understand what everyone's problem is.
50,000, Mr. Secretary, 130,000 jobs, more than double what was expected. 4.3% unemployment, closed border. What is wrong with the mood of the country? What are people feeling that have some polls showing that people miss Joe Biden's economy? How does that work? Where's the disconnect?
Now, you all know how I feel about our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Well, his response to this line of tone-deaf questioning is just as you would expect.
I think, as I've said many times, 2025 is about setting the table. 2026 is going to be a banquet for the American people.
A banquet? That's some prediction, Scott. Hey, generally speaking, do your predictions tend to work out? Because I distinctly remember you saying that 2025 was also going to be a feast.
My predictions have been bad. Have been bad.
Huh, okay, that's what I thought. So hang tight, because Kernan actually lets the mask drop on this next question, and I think you're going to love Bessent's response.
What needs to happen to make Americans feel better, to maybe increase the Republicans' chances of holding the House and Senate?
Well, Joe, if the Democrats want to compete on the 2026 economy, I think Republicans, House, Senate, and local candidates, they are willing to do it.
Challenge accepted. If, like Pam Bondi, all you have to run on is the stock market, then you're building on sand, my friend. We'll dig into this a little further when we get into the data releases, but the bottom line is that nothing is working to get the engine cranking on Main Street. Now, here's a guy named Jim Paulson. He's an economist and a former CIO of an investment firm saying the one thing that actually matters.
To me, having no jobs is just unacceptable in American capitalism. It means no prospects for Americans, and I don't think that can stand. I think if you back out trade year to date or over the last 4 quarters, Mike, you got real GDP growth, which is 1.8%. If you back out net exports, if you take personal consumption and investment spending together, they're growing just barely over 2%. That used to be the stall speed for the economy.
Now, later, we're going to hear from the lead economist at Moody's from the same interview, because he also has a solid take on inflation. But Paulson gets it exactly right here. Jobs aren't moving, and you're going to see that in the labor data when we get there in a little bit. The administration was celebrating the recent release, but it was so much worse than it appears on the surface. But back to the main takeaway here. They're all sent out into the world with the same BS talking point. How can you say things are bad when the market is so good? Well, the market is good because Barack Obama and Joe Biden sent trillions of dollars into the global economy and set stock markets, both here and abroad, mind you, absolutely ablaze. And here's the thing. They can stay that way for a very long time. There are cracks showing up in the bond market, and everyone's still holding their breath when it comes to private credit. But even in these areas, there is so much money running through the entire financial system that needs a home. And equities are the fastest, easiest way to move money around, to get a return, to get in and get out. The US stock market remains the biggest and most liquid market on the planet, and our companies still outperform most corporate sectors in other countries. Now, it is worth noting that foreign indices, especially in Europe, have actually been outperforming US markets. So this is a global phenomenon, but remember, it's happening because of our dollars. But it all shows up